Good evening. This right here is the headquarters of the Centers for Disease Control, otherwise known as the CDC. They are one of the main organizations pushing all of the guidance in this country, which says, among other things, that everyone above the age of 5 should be getting vaccinated. And then, of course, the politicians in the different parts of the country, they take their guidance and they use it as justification for the various concrete policies that we've been seeing play out for the past 2 years, such as the various vaccine and mask mandates. However, one of the main questions that have been lingering in the backs of many people's minds was whether the CDC employees themselves were being forced to get vaccinated. And in fact, along that line, there was a very fascinating exchange last November between Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana and Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who is the head of the CDC. Take a listen.
What percent of CDC employees are vaccinated?
We're actively encouraging vaccination in all of our employees and doing a lot of education and outreach in order to get our agency fully vaccinated.
And but the percent?
I don't have that for you today.
And so we here at the Epoch Times, we saw that clip and we became quite curious. How could it be that the agency, which quite literally collects data from everywhere in the country, doesn't have the data on their own employees? And so what we did was that we filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, as well as the CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And for quite a while, these agencies were actually refusing to hand over their most recent data. When we repeatedly pressed them on it, they would only give us the data up to the end of last year, which is kind of irrelevant given the fact that we are almost 5 full months into the year 2022. However, we here at the Epoch Times, we filed an appeal, and wouldn't you know it, just 2 days ago, the CDC finally complied and handed over their data, which shows that hundreds of their employees have not received the COVID vaccine. Specifically, Mr. Roger Ando, who is the Freedom of Information Act officer within the agency, he told us that a total of 382 workers at the CDC were unvaccinated, with another 9 workers at the CDC having received only 1 dose of the mRNA vaccine, meaning that they don't qualify as being quote-unquote fully vaccinated under the CDC's own definition. And for your reference, collectively, this number represents approximately 3.2% of the CDC's total workforce. And in terms of why they were not forthcoming with this data initially, well, one of the officers who works on Freedom of Information Act requests within the HHS, he told us that it appeared to just be an accident. Here's specifically what he told us here at the Epoch Times via email, quote, "The response I got to your appeal from the CDC gave me the impression they didn't mean to withhold any information in the first place. Based on that, my personal belief is that this was just an accidental omission on their part." Now, in terms of the full breakdown at the CDC, here are the numbers that we received. As I mentioned earlier, 382 people were not vaccinated at all. 9 people received 1 dose. 12,399 were fully vaccinated, and 5,810 employees said that they had received a booster dose as well. Although it is worth noting that the agency made a specific point of stressing that employees do not have to say whether they've had a booster shot or not, although it's a little bit unclear as to why they make such a distinction between booster shots and regular shots. Regardless, though, getting back to the point, approximately 3.2% of the CDC's total workforce is unvaccinated. And then furthermore, in their disclosures to us, the CDC also revealed that they have granted exactly 0 exemption requests for the federal worker vaccine mandate, which for a long time didn't really matter because that mandate was actually suspended by a federal court. However, as we discussed in a previous episode, the courts recently reversed the suspension, and they are now allowing the federal mandate to go back into effect, which will begin on May 31st. And so we reached out to the CDC and we asked them what exactly will happen to the hundreds of their own employees who are not vaccinated after this mandate goes into effect. However, they have yet to get back to us. Furthermore, it's also worth noting that even though the CDC got back to us with their updated numbers, the 3 other health agencies, meaning the FDA, the NIH, and the CMS, have not. And so take that for what you will. And also smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. However, since we're on the topic of the CDC, there's something else I believe is worth discussing that has to do with this 37-page report which just came out of the Government Accountability Office. And according to the whistleblowers cited in this report, both the CDC as well as the FDA, they were altering their COVID guidance and they were suppressing their scientific findings amidst political pressure. Now, to start with, the agency behind this particular report, as I mentioned just a moment ago, is the Government Accountability Office. And in case you've never heard of it sits under the legislative branch, and it essentially is the ultimate audit institution of the federal government. It's oftentimes referred to as the congressional watchdog. And for this report, the agency spoke with 2 former directors of the CDC, 4 former directors of the FDA, as well as 17 employees in these different health agencies who were involved in the pandemic response. And after conducting these interviews with the whistleblowers, the researchers exposed allegations of what they refer to as political interference within the scientific reports. Specifically, that for one, the research was being tampered with, and that secondly, that neither the FDA or the CDC had a system in place for reporting allegations of political interference. And that furthermore, the staff was not even trained to either detect or to report political interference at all. Here's specifically what the report wrote on this front. Quote, "A few respondents from the CDC and the FDA stated that they felt that the potential political interference they observed resulted in the alteration or suppression of scientific findings. Some of these respondents believe that this potential political interference may have resulted in the politically motivated alteration of public health guidance or delayed publication of COVID-19 related scientific findings." Furthermore, the whistleblower said that the reason they did not speak out earlier was, for one, due to fear of retaliation, and that secondly, they did not know even how to report these types of issues to their higher-ups. Here's specifically what the report said on this front. Quote, "Through semi-structured interviews and a confidential hotline, employees at the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH told the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office, they observed incidents that they perceived to be political interference, but did not report them for various reasons. These reasons included fearing retaliation, being unsure how to report issues, and believing that agency leaders were already aware." And then, in terms of what this type of political influence actually looks like in practice, well, many people are pointing to the example that happened with Dr. Anthony Fauci just 2 days ago. Specifically, during an interview with PBS, Dr. Fauci clearly stated twice that America was out of the pandemic phase in regards to COVID. Here's the clip.
"We are certainly right now in this country out of the pandemic phase. Namely, we don't have 900,000 new infections a day and tens and tens and tens of thousands of hospitalizations and thousands of deaths. We are at a low level right now. So if you're saying, are we out of the pandemic phase in this country? We are."
However, the very next day, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was talking about the same issue, and here's what she said.
"So there's no question that we're in a moment, a different moment in our fight against COVID. But we also know COVID isn't over, and the pandemic isn't over."
And so, on the one hand, you have Dr. Fauci saying that we are out of the pandemic phase, but the very next day, you have the White House saying something that appears to be in complete contradiction. And so, who do you listen to? Well, that's not a real question, because shortly afterwards, Dr. Fauci came out and he said that people were misinterpreting his statement. Here's specifically what Dr. Fauci said shortly after that White House press conference. Quote, "I want to clarify one thing. I probably should have said the acute component of the pandemic phase. I understand how that can lead to some misinterpretation." And so you see how this all played out. At first, you had Dr. Fauci state rather unambiguously that we were out of the pandemic phase. However, the very next day, you had the White House come out and say that we are still in a pandemic. And then shortly afterwards, Dr. Fauci came back out to set the record straight about how people were, quote unquote, misinterpreting his earlier statement. And just so we're perfectly clear, here was, again, exactly what he said in that earlier statement.
"We are certainly right now in this country out of the pandemic phase."
And so again, who knows what was happening behind the scenes, but at the very least, this 37-page report, which found that the CDC and the FDA were altering their COVID guidance based on political pressure, does put this new episode into a slightly different context. If you'd like to read more about anything that we've discussed in today's episode, I'll throw all the links down in the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a super quick moment to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And also, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button so that way you can get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed every single weekday. And now, sir, what's this? It's me. Of course it's secure, because we use the Sekur app, which is the sponsor of today's episode, as well as an awesome email and message service provider that actually cares about your privacy. Now listen, it's no big secret that our data is being mined and remined all the time. In fact, there was a recent study that was published in the year 2020, which found that 155 million Americans, likely including you and me, have suffered some form of data breach. And frankly, that's only what's publicly known. However, all those past problems with privacy issues and data mining, well, that can be an issue of the past, because moving forward, you can use the Sekur app, which both your messages, your emails, and your phone calls can remain private. That's because they have their servers and their data centers located in Switzerland instead of in the US or China or Russia. And why does that matter? Because Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world, and they are not subject to the intrusive Cloud Act. Now, what I love the most about the Sekur app is that they don't collect my data, they don't mine my data, they don't mine the data and phone numbers of my friends and family. Everything is private. And best of all, at least in my opinion, this does not work with your big tech email provider just because it is not secure. And so check it out. You can head on over to Sekur.com, and if you use promo code Roman, you can get 25% off. And frankly, their rates are not even that expensive. It only starts with $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and messenger combo. And best of all, they offer a 7-day free trial. And now in closing, I'd like to mention that if you happen to work for some kind of an organization, a company, or any sort of agency, and you would like to be a whistleblower, if you'd like to tell the rest of the world about something that's happening within your purview, well, I would love to help you. Here's our email. It's factsmatter@epochtimes.com. So send us any material, any videos, any audio recordings that you might have, and I would love to help you share them out with the rest of the world. And then secondly, I mentioned this earlier, but we recently started up our Facts Matter podcast, so that way, if you listen to audio podcast, if you listen to, let's say, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or a podcast on some of the other platforms, you can now listen to Facts Matter as well. I'll throw the links to all of our different podcast platforms. They'll be down in the description box below. But also, if you are, for instance, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you just search for Facts Matter, you can find us on there. And if you happen to listen to us, please leave us a review, ideally a 5-star review, because on these platforms, those reviews are what really matter. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.